This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
China ramps up anti-coronavirus efforts as confirmed cases surpass 44,000. Libyan rebels block UN flights in and out of the country. And Egyptian police security forces kill 27 suspected terrorists. Hello and welcome to Africa Live, only on CGTN. I'm Karen Roberts, live in Nairobi. Rama joins me now with all your business headlines.
That's right, Karen. Here's what's coming up in the course of the hour. Angola will issue an international arrest warrant for the former first daughter, Isabel de Santos. And authorities in Tanzania are starting to fight back as piles of plastic waste rise and rise. We'll have the details on those stories and lots more coming your way in the course of the hour. For now, though, let's start with the latest in current affairs with Karen.
Thank you very much, Rama. We start with the latest on the coronavirus outbreak, which has now been officially named COVID-19 by the World Health Organization. Chinese health authorities say the recovery rate has now risen to 10.6%. The total number of confirmed cases in China has passed 44,000. The death toll stands at over 1,100, while more than 5,000 people have recovered. More than half of the confirmed cases and most of the deaths are in Hubei province, where the epidemic began. The number of newly confirmed cases outside Hubei have dropped by more than half for 8 straight days. Guangdong, Zhejiang and Henan provinces are the most affected areas outside Hubei, with each reporting more than 1,000 cases. Beijing has reported more than 350 cases and Shanghai over 310. The virus has spread to 24 other countries, with over 440 cases. In Japan, at least 39 more people aboard the Diamond Princess cruise ship, as well as one quarantine officer, are confirmed to be infected. That raises the total to 175. While the global community has rallied in support of the fight against the coronavirus epidemic, many have shared their views on China's efforts to contain the virus. Meng Qingsheng reports.
Since the outbreak of the coronavirus, there has been a variety of sentiments worldwide, such as fear and anxiety. But there has also been love and encouragement. Many netizens abroad have been closely following the situation in China, especially Wuhan, on YouTube. Some say the Chinese government is mobilizing every available resource, human and material, to combat the spread of this virus. Great job. And I'm praying for everyone affected by this. Stay strong and know that there are people out here who care. Also, after sad and bad time, there's always a happy and good time. So stay strong, China.
I've been living in China for just about 17 years, and I sort of have an insight on this coronavirus that's been going around and how the Chinese people are dealing with it. And, you know, I've got to say that these guys are impressive. They've taken it upon themselves to make sure that this coronavirus does not spread. Any other country in the world would not even get close to these. You've got people, medical staff, police, school children, parents, business owners, all moving in the same direction. As you go through hard times together, it brings you closer together. I'm impressed with China, and I'm telling you, I've never seen anything like this in my life. And we probably will never see anything like this in our lives again.
epidemic by our Chinese government. The Hoshishan Hospital was built and put into use within 10 days. This is really impressive. I have told my South African friends that China is a country that can make the impossible possible. After the outbreak, Wuhan started the lockdown in the city. People all over the country were actively responding to the measures. I believe Chinese can unite and work together to overcome difficulties. It's in our spirit. We are very confident that with the joint effort of our Chinese government and the Chinese people, we will surely win the battle over the epidemic of novel coronavirus.
I'm deeply moved to see the various measures taken by our governments at all levels to prevent the spread of the epidemic. We can only do it under the leadership of our Chinese Communist Party and the government. We're all united in fighting against the epidemic. The supply of life necessities are continuous, and social order is very organized. We hope that the cure for NCP can be developed as soon as possible.
In Tunisia, 350 Tunisians and foreign travellers from China and other destinations are currently under medical monitoring. That's according to the Health Control Unit of the country's health ministry. It's part of the country's prevention strategy against the coronavirus. The medical follow-up will last 14 days. No suspected cases have been recorded so far in Tunisia. CGTN's Adnan Chouachi tells us more.
A permanent medical unit made up of 6 nurses and 2 physicians was deployed at Tunis Carthage Airport 24 hours a day. The unit is in charge of controlling all travelers.
The ministry's strategy is based on 3 pillars. Prevention comes first, followed by programming and planning, and finally facing the corona outbreak if the virus is detected. But we have not reached the 3rd phase because no cases have been reported yet.
The Director General of Basic Health Care added that the ministry is also keeping in touch with all travelers coming from China, as well as passengers on board the same flight.
Travelers from China who show signs like high temperature, coughing and respiratory problems are immediately isolated. The follow-up continues even if they are allowed to leave the airport or other border crossings.
The ministry called on travelers to report any symptoms they might experience during the first 14 days from the first day of their arrival.
The coronavirus is a deadly disease, contagious and terrifying, because it can be transmitted to humans in different ways, through respiration, touch, or even sanitary towels. Tunisian health authorities have responded promptly and efficiently.
The health ministry has taken all necessary preventive measures, including the creation of a permanent commission for monitoring the spread of the virus across the world. The commission brings together representatives of various ministries. It works in collaboration with the Office of the World Health Organization in Tunis. The Ministry of Health has taken several measures in coordination with the Office of Aviation and Airports and national and international airlines to promptly deal with any suspected cases. Doctors and nurses have distributed questionnaires to travelers, allowing them to identify the trajectory of the countries they have visited. Adnan Chouachi, CGTN, Tunis.
The outbreak of the coronavirus pneumonia is worrying many Chinese living in Egypt. The Chinese Overseas Association in Egypt has initiated a second medical donation initiative. The body says it has so far received a popular and positive response from the Chinese in Cairo, and in just 48 hours about 1,700 kilograms of medical supplies have been donated. The supplies include 268,000 medical surgical masks, 135,000 pairs of medical gloves, 8,000 N95 masks and 1,000 pieces of protective clothing. The supplies are expected to arrive in China on Thursday morning on Sichuan Airlines. The first batch of medical supplies donated by the Chinese Association arrived in China last week. To Guinea now, where authorities have offered human resources to help China in its fight against the epidemic.
We offer our condolences to China and we share their pains. China was one of our partners who helped us when we were faced with the Ebola epidemic. Today, China is going through difficulties, so Guinea is available to help it. Indeed, we cannot help them with the logistics, but we have qualified human resources who had participated in the fight against the corona epidemic. Our men are therefore prepared to make the trip to China to help this great friendly country to be able to overcome this disease, which is testing the Chinese people this time. We have Guinean students in China. They're all confined to their campuses and they do not go out. The president of the association told me that there's been no case reported at their level so far. So we support the security measure taken by China through communication with our students in China.
Well, we are going to a break now. Don't go away. Lots more to come, including Libyan rebels block UN flights in and out of the country. And Egypt roots for joint Africa counter-terrorism force.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca. Among the crowds in Cairo.
Who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
Along the waters of the Nile. Along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
To Egypt now, where counter-terrorism efforts continue in the Sinai province. Security forces have killed at least 27 suspected terrorists in North Sinai. CGTN's Adel El Mahrouki has more.
The Egyptian armed forces and police continue their counter-terrorism efforts in North Sinai. An Interior Ministry statement on Tuesday evening has confirmed the engagement of its forces with a terrorist cell in Al Arish city in North Sinai. National Security Department has gathered information about the whereabouts of that cell. The location is presumed to be a base for planning and executing attacks. Targeting the site, they've engaged in a crossfire, killing 11 terrorists, according to the police statement. Some have managed to escape. Tracking them down, the police forces have killed 6 more. The group had 10 machine guns, 2 shotguns and 5 improvised explosive devices. 3 terrorist attacks have been recently reported in North Sinai, one against a natural gas pipeline between Egypt and Israel, an assassination of a senior military officer, and an attack on a military checkpoint. In response, Egyptian security forces there say that so far they have killed 30 terrorists. With groups like ISIL renewing their threats against Egypt, security forces are saying their mission to counter terrorism in North Sinai will continue. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Well, staying in Egypt, the country is leading an African effort to fight terrorism on the continent. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi announced his willingness to host an African counter-terrorism summit. And Cairo introduced an initiative to form joint African counter-terrorism forces.
Egypt believes that unilateral measures to fight terrorist groups in each African nation won't end this global threat. Cairo wants Africa to consider the formation of a joint African counter-terrorism force.
To have an African force that is capable of protecting nations and the treasures God has blessed the continent with is part of the Egyptian initiative which aims to terminate extremism and terrorism that has only brought destruction to Africa.
During the African Union Summit, Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi presented this initiative. He offered to host a continental counter-terrorism summit dedicated to discuss the formation of these forces.
Egypt wants Africa to be safe because the national security of Egypt is interlinked with Africa's and the other way around. The continent and Egypt are cooperating to achieve comprehensive development, stability and peace. Egypt has taken major steps to counter terrorism in the Sinai and has gained huge experiences and now has formed a vision.
This week, the Egyptian Armed Forces has hosted a 3-day meeting with the Sahel G5 nations. Cairo offered counter-terrorism trainings to their military forces and to work on common measures to fight that expanding threat in the region.
Egypt is bringing the chiefs of staff of the Sahel region so that together they can face the common threat of terrorism. Cairo hoped that such meetings could form the foundation of its initiative of creating joint African counter-terrorism forces. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
The United Nations says forces loyal to Khalifa Haftar have blocked flights carrying its staff to and from Libya. This has hampered humanitarian and mediation efforts by the United Nations. Well, according to the UN mission in Libya, Haftar's eastern-based Libya National Army has on several occasions refused to allow the regular UN flights to land. Since last April, Haftar's forces have been trying to capture the capital Tripoli from the internationally recognized government. UN envoy Ghassan Salameh has been mediating between the LNA and the Tripoli government, but relations have been difficult as the Libya mission has condemned airstrikes blamed on the LNA. Eastern officials have accused Salameh of being biased against them, but the United Nations has denied these accusations. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa has paid tribute to his country's first democratically elected leader, the late statesman President Nelson Mandela. Considered one of the country's defining moments, on the 11th of February 1990, Mandela was released from prison after 27 years behind bars.
President Ramaphosa was speaking from the balcony of Cape Town City Hall, the exact spot from which Madiba had addressed thousands of people who'd come to catch a glimpse of their struggle icon.
We have waited too long for our freedom.
I cannot think of a single day in the history of our country when an event positively changed the course of the country like the release of Nelson Mandela from prison. It was an emotional moment when Utatu Madiba worked out of Victor Verster prison as a free man after 27 lonely and painful years of imprisonment.
The presidency said the 30th commemoration of Nelson Mandela's release sought to refresh in the memory of all South Africans the central and sustained contribution made by Madiba and his comrades towards South Africa's liberation struggle.
There was simply magic in the air. That was the day when we touched the future with our hearts and our hopes. All that mattered for all of us was that our freedom had finally arrived. The day Madiba was released was the day we all knew that apartheid was dead and it was finished.
It was an extraordinary moment. It was the climax of us knowing for sure that democracy was going to come. At the end of the day, all the sacrifice, all the service that we put into liberating Nelson Mandela also liberated all of South Africans, black and white, from the prison of prejudice and racism.
The generation of Mandela was a generation whose war cry was freedom in our lifetime. Our generation was a generation that needed to push that agenda for that freedom to be attained. We did that. Now, the current generation is a generation that needs to liberate the country and its people, socially, economically, and otherwise.
All the speakers at the event agreed that the huge economic imbalances in South Africa needed to be dealt with in order to carry on the legacy of Nelson Mandela for the next 30 years. Renadel Calm, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
South Africa's governing African National Congress has launched a series of commemorative exhibitions to mark 30 years since the release of former President Nelson Mandela from prison. This year also marks 30 years since the lifting of a ban on political organizations. CGTN's Yolisa Njamela has more.
The venue for this exhibition is quite deliberate. It's being held here at the Constitutional Hill. The Constitutional Hill is a living museum telling a journey of South Africa's democracy. It's also home to the country's constitutional court. 30 years ago, Nelson Mandela was released from Victor Verster prison, now known as Drakenstein, after having spent 27 years behind bars. Mandela walked the streets as a free man, and hundreds of fellow ANC comrades alongside him. It was a historic day for Black South Africans, and thousands came out to celebrate the moment and to listen to Mandela speak. A number of commemorative events are taking place across South Africa in remembrance of that historic day. Here at the Constitutional Hill, the ANC is showcasing various artifacts depicting the 30-year journey of both former President Nelson Mandela and his organization.
To tell the story of our rich liberation heritage through the power of artistry here at the Constitutional Hill, an important side to have emerged through our hard-earned freedom. His release from prison and the unbanning of the liberation movement on the 2nd of February of the same year, 1990, marked a new chapter in the history of our nation.
The image of Mandela walking through the gates of the prison finally confirmed to millions of South Africans that the new era in the country had indeed dawned. ANC Secretary General says the best tribute the governing party could pay to Mandela's legacy and his generation would be to ensure the unity and renewal of the ANC.
The nation owes a debt of gratitude that we'll never be able to repay in our lifetime. The best tribute we can pay in honor of the legacy of Nelson Mandela and his generation is to strengthen the ANC by devoting all our collective efforts towards the unity and renewal in our movement.
Mandela passed on in 2013. His legacy lives on. Yolisa Njamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Thousands of Kenyans gathered to bid farewell to the country's longest-serving president, Daniel Arap Moi. Moi was laid to rest at his home in Kabarak, located in Kenya's Rift Valley. Family members and dignitaries eulogized Moi at Kabarak University. Members of his family remembered him fondly, but others touched on his mixed legacy. The country's current president, Uhuru Kenyatta, was among those present. The military gave Moi a 19-gun salute before his coffin was lowered into the ground. He was laid to rest beside his wife, Lena, who died in 2004.
We shall miss him. To the family, led by Raymond, Philip, Gideon, your sisters, your entire family, please accept my deepest condolence on my own behalf, and indeed on behalf of my entire family. The greatest gift that we can give him is to continue to emulate his life in the things that we do every day.
He was many things to many people: a leader, an environmentalist, a mentor, educationalist, and for those who found themselves on the wrong side of his favor, a formidable enemy. I am immensely privileged and grateful to God to be the late President Moi's first grandchild. I was thus lucky to grow under the tutelage of one of Africa's greatest leaders.
Sudan's ousted President Omar al-Bashir and other wanted officials are to be handed over to the International Criminal Court. The government and rebel groups say it's part of efforts to end the country's civil wars, including in Darfur. But the move has elicited mixed reaction among Sudanese citizens.
Sudan's rulers have agreed to hand over ousted leader Omar al-Bashir and other wanted officials to the ICC. The military had earlier rejected this, saying Bashir will be tried at home. So why now the change of tide?
We cannot achieve justice unless we heal the wound using justice itself. We cannot run away at all from facing those who have committed crimes against humanity and war crimes committed against innocent people in Darfur and in other places. Justice cannot be achieved without the appearance of those who face arrest warrants before the International Criminal Court.
We want peace in any way possible in this country. If the movements approve of ex-President Omar al-Bashir appearing before the ICC, and if this is what they want, then there is no problem. Omar al-Bashir is a war criminal to the protesters.
While there are no details of when he will be handed over to the ICC, some people have rejected the idea.
He should not be handed over to the International Criminal Court. This means there is a weakness in the Sudanese judicial system. As long as he is a Sudanese citizen, then he should be tried in the Sudanese state, regardless of anything with Sudanese laws. Immunity will be lifted. As the Sudanese people, we ask that the judiciary be firm and just.
Bashir was the first sitting president wanted by the ICC. He is accused for alleged war crimes, genocide and crimes against humanity in Darfur in 2003. At least 300,000 people were killed. The court at The Hague issued the warrants of his arrest in 2009 and 2010. The former leader is currently in custody in Sudan's capital, Khartoum. Last year in December, he was found guilty of corruption and illegitimate possession of foreign currency and sentenced to 2 years in a correctional facility. Chamgono, CGTN.
Well, let's now go to Rama for all the latest business news. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Karen. Here's what's coming up in business. Angola to issue an international arrest warrant for the billionaire former first daughter, Isabel de Santos. And authorities in Tanzania are starting to fight back as piles of plastic and electronic waste continue to rise.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay, we'll head up now.
Beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible? And why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sutra. Hello, Nairobi.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. Let's start in Portugal. Authorities over there have ordered a freeze on the bank accounts of the billionaire businesswoman Isabel de Santos. Now, the order was prompted by a request from Angola, where she's been implicated in a criminal investigation into the misappropriation of funds from the state oil company Sonangol. Angola could issue an international arrest warrant for the former first daughter. That's if she doesn't cooperate with a fraud investigation going on in Africa's second largest oil producer.
De Santos, the daughter of former Angolan President José Eduardo de Santos, has repeatedly denied any wrongdoing in the past weeks of investigation linked to leaked reports of mismanagement of funds and corruption.
Well, the allegations are false.
As part of a request for international judicial cooperation by the Angolan authorities, Portugal's Public Prosecutor's Office requested for the seizure of bank accounts belonging to Isabel dos Santos in the country.
I think this is a good step because I think we want to avoid that any reputational damage impacts on the activity of these companies.
Last month, Angola named Dos Santos a formal suspect over allegations of misappropriation of funds during her time as chairperson of state oil company Sonangol. Angolan authorities froze her assets in the African country in December. A banking source familiar with the case said the accounts held by Dos Santos were seized at Millennium BCP, Portugal's largest listed bank. Portugal's central bank and Millennium BCP declined to comment on the matter. Isabel de Santos also sold her stake in Portugal's companies Eurobic and Efasec, where she held 42% and 65% stake respectively.
If you look at the impact, which is adverse, about the origins of the money of Isabel de Santos, which have still to be proven, the reputational damages to Portuguese companies could be significant. So her willingness to divest quickly is helpful in this context. It will mean that the reputational damage can be diminished and hopefully totally avoided.
But for Angola, the allegations expose the sustained damage on their economy and reputation. Angola's citizens hope that the investigations would expose everyone involved in corruption in Angola, not just Dos Santos.
In my opinion, it's not only the Dos Santos family or even the old Transport Minister Augusto Thomas that stole from the country. There is still a lot of stuff to be exposed because Isabel is not the only one guilty.
Another suspect in the probe was the manager of Sonangol's account, who was found dead at his home in Lisbon. A police source said the death appeared to be a suicide. By the end of last year, Angolan authorities froze Dos Santos' assets following allegations by prosecutors that she and her husband had steered payments of more than $1 billion from state companies to farms in which they held stakes. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
On to some company news now. South Africa's MTN Group expects full-year headline earnings to rise by as much as 50%. But that is still a bit of a slowdown, though, compared to the previous year due to one-off items, including interest on regulatory fines in Nigeria. MTN Nigeria has been dealing with a near $1.1 billion fine for failing to cut off more than 5 million unregistered SIM cards back in 2015. In January, Nigeria's Attorney General said he had withdrawn a $2 billion tax demand against the group, and that brought to a close its latest disagreement with the government there. Oil-rich Nigeria accounts for roughly a third of MTN's core profits, but the country has posed a raft of problems for the firm in recent years. The company, of course, was founded with South African government help back in 1994, and MTN since then has been touted as one of South Africa's biggest corporate success stories. But clashes with regulators have distracted management, and that in turn has hampered its revenue growth. Still in Nigeria, authorities are considering a Eurobond sale of between $2.8 and $3 billion. It's to help partially fund the 2020 budget after President Muhammadu Buhari wins approval from Parliament. Now, the advisor to the country's finance minister says that the process can commence if legislators approve it. Nigeria's Eurobond plan comes after its West African neighbour, Ghana, sold a $3 billion Eurobond just last week. That issue was 5 times oversubscribed as investors are chasing high yields in debt, despite the impact of a coronavirus outbreak in China and the effect that could have in turn on its major trading partners here in Africa. Nigeria has been borrowing quite a bit to fund growth after the 2016 recession, cut income and weakened its currency. Now, the Nigerian government has also launched the National Gas Transportation Network Code. That system is aimed at eliminating existing bottlenecks to ensure quality production in the gas sector. This was announced at the opening of the Nigeria International Petroleum Summit in the capital, Abuja. CGTN's Kelechi Mekalam was there.
It's the formal launch of Nigeria's National Gas Transportation Network Code. And this has caught the attention of key players here. With gas production enhancement, transparency, gas pipeline integrity and revenue generation being at the center of this initiative. Government says the code provides immense opportunities to explore for economic development.
The code will stimulate the domestic gas market, drive gas-based industrialization, and the realization of the government's aspiration to move 100 million Nigerians out of poverty.
The network code also aims to expand gas use and encourage private pipeline investments along the gas value chain.
Nigeria, as a major oil-producing nation, remains ready and accessible for legitimate investment from all interested countries, individuals, and partners. Let me assure our foreign delegates that their investment are well secured in Nigeria, and a high return on investment is always guaranteed.
And industry watchers believe the initiative is a step in the right direction.
There will be smooth and effective sales agreements that will promote individual interest in the course of the transaction. Then two, it will also provide space or spaces for others or other players to join or to come into the sector.
The code is a contractual framework between the gas transportation network operator and the gas shippers. It specifies the terms and guidelines for operations and use of the gas network. The operators have until the next 6 months to completely migrate from the existing agreement to the National Gas Transportation Network Code. Kelechi Amekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Now, managing electronic waste is proving to be a challenge in Tanzania. The National Statistics Bureau over there reported that e-waste increased almost 17 times in the last 20 years. The country generated about 2,000 tons of waste in 1998, but that has risen to close to 36,000 tons by the end of 2017. But there's some recycling solutions coming to market, as CGTN's Daniel Kijo now reports.
Gideon Chilambo has decided to take e-waste head-on. His company is among the country's leading e-waste recyclers, and Gideon says electronic waste management should be given more attention.
If you take that lithium battery, you throw away at the rainfield, when it gets hot, it explodes. Where the remainings remain, nothing can grow forever.
Gideon and his team collects e-waste, dismantle it, and exports parts that are recycled in Europe. He also sells copper and steel to other recyclers. Lukiom Jema has been a technician for over 20 years. He says management of e-waste is poor because people don't know what to do with it.
A big percent of families keep electronic equipment that they don't need. They refuse to dispose of it. We honestly don't have a specific dumping area for electronic waste.
According to the National Bureau of Statistics, Tanzania imported about 48 million tons of electronic equipment in 2018, of which they estimate 35 million eventually became e-waste. Environmentalists say that e-waste can cause respiratory problems, oxidative stress, DNA damage, and increase the possibility of developing cancer. Despite this, managing it is still a problem in Tanzania, as technology is low, funds and personnel are inadequate. The biggest challenge, however, is the general awareness on this life and death issue. The National Environmental Management Council admits that the country does not have a clear e-waste policy. It says it has been making efforts to address the challenges, but it is far from achieving its goal. Officers say Tanzania has entered the Regional E-Waste Management Strategy, which aims to support e-waste management activities in the East African countries.
Through the strategic actions of creating awareness, fundraising for establishing e-waste management facilities in all these East African countries, we are hopeful that we'll have a sustainable e-waste management in the future.
Environmentalists insist that it is critical at this stage for Tanzania to establish recycling or systematic collection and processing of electronic waste. They say the government and the private sector must now work together to offer solutions to solve the ever-growing e-waste problem. Daniel Kijo, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
Right, then I'll leave you there for the time being. I'll be back at the top of the hour, though. We'll be looking at that story out of Portugal and Angola yet again. The public prosecutor in Portugal saying he's ordered the seizure of Portuguese bank accounts belonging to the former first daughter in Angola, who's of course a suspect in a fraud investigation in Angola. We'll have the latest on that story. I'll see you at 1800 GMT. For now, back to Karen.
Thank you very much, Rama. Well, we're going to a short break now. Don't go away. Lots more to come.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Stainless steel cutlery is found in many households, but in Lagos, in Nigeria, a young artist is using the utensils in creative ways. Here's CGTN's Deji Badmus with the story.
You wouldn't be wrong to call him an iron bender, but he's much more than that. Colin Sakborode is an artist of a different kind. And this is what stands him out. Stainless steel cutleries, his medium of expression. These ones are ready to be transformed into unique art pieces. With his gloves and protective mask on, Colin Sakborode gathers his materials and gets to work. He cuts the spoons, bends them into shape, and then welds them together. Cutlery is to Akborode what paints and brushes are to painters. He's created a strong connection with the material such that he can literally create anything with it.
I fall in love naturally with materials that are stainless, of stainless feel, you know, because they have this pureness of spirit, they have this pureness of their soul, you know, so I naturally will connect, and it's difficult for me to think out of it. I hold my materials and it almost tells me what to do, you know, how to twist, how to manipulate, you know, how to create a bend or create a movement or a form.
Akborode's finished works are stunning in every way. He only has to conceive and sketch an idea, and it will be completely transformed under his hands. He says his works are primarily inspired by the environment he grew up in.
I grew up in a rural environment, so I was largely inspired by the rural life. You know, we used to do a lot of bird hunting as a child. And I guess that started out my passion and interest in creating a lot of bird sculptures.
Akborode has created some form of signatory right to this medium. He's also evolved into more engaging pieces like the human, animal, and abstract forms. Some of these works take about 2,000 pieces of spoons or more. He relies massively on social media for the promotion of his works, which have been receiving mind-blowing responses from across the world.
It's one thing to create a beautiful bird, but it's another thing to be able to evoke into that piece what people can connect with, you know, because art is not just the visual representation of an image, but it's about passing out messages. It's about encoding messages into these pieces that people can connect with.
Due to the complex nature of his work, getting a studio space was the first hurdle he had to cross. And as he's evolving, newer challenges are presenting themselves. But the major one that still affects his artistic flow is inadequate power supply.
My materials are welded, they are metal, stainless metals, they are all welded together. You know, so one of the most important things, apart from having a material, is light, power, you know, and power is still a challenge, you know, because it's always not there where you need it. Sometimes we have to wait till when you have power to be able to work, so that will slow down my work process a lot of time.
Breaking barriers and creating new design patterns are what sets Akporode apart. With this, his goal is to be at the biggest auction houses in the world as a top artist, pushing the story of Africa to the global stage. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
All of the sports news coming up for you after the break, including South Africa hosts Africa Junior Tennis Championships in Pretoria.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa.